1. Hurricane Katrina, 2005, USA. Damage, $125+ billion. Deaths, 1,136. Details, devastated New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. A severe levee failure flooded 80% of the city. 2. Hurricane Harvey, 2017, USA. Damage, $125 billion. Deaths, 107. Details, caused catastrophic flooding in Houston, dropped over 60 inches of rain in some areas. There was Hurricane Maria, 2017, Puerto Rico. Damage, $91 billion. Deaths, 2,075, official estimate. Details, destroyed infrastructure across Puerto Rico. Full power wasn't restored for nearly a year. Hurricane Irma, 2017, Caribbean, USA. Damage, $77 billion. Deaths, 134. Details, Category 5, storm, obliterated islands like Barbuda, St. Martin. Florida was heavily impacted. 5. Typhoon Haiyan, Yolanda, 2013, Philippines. Damage, $5.8 billion. Deaths, 6,300 plus. Details, one of the strongest storms ever recorded at landfall, created storm surges that flattened cities like Tacloban. 6. Hurricane Sandy, 2012, USA, Caribbean. Damage, $70 billion. Deaths, 233. Details, major flooding in New York and New Jersey, largest Atlantic hurricane in size. In August 2021, the United States faced one of its most devastating natural disasters, Hurricane Ida. What started as a tropical disturbance would soon become a nightmare that would leave an indelible mark on American history. Picture this. It's August 29th, exactly 16 years to the day after Hurricane Katrina. The residents of Louisiana watched with growing anxiety as Ida intensified into a Category 4 monster with winds reaching 150 miles per hour. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. This cruel coincidence sent chills down the spines of those who remembered Katrina's devastation. When Ida made landfall, it unleashed its fury with frightening force. Homes were torn apart, power lines snapped like twigs, and entire communities were left in darkness. But what made Ida particularly treacherous was its persistence. Unlike most hurricanes that weaken quickly over land, Ida had other plans. The storm carved a destructive path northward, something few could have predicted. As it reached the northeast, it transformed into a different kind of threat. The remnants of Ida collided with another weather system, creating catastrophic flooding in places like New York City, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Subway stations turned into waterfalls. Basement apartments became death traps. The region was caught completely off guard. The numbers tell a sobering story. More than 115 lives lost, making it one of the deadliest storms in recent U.S. history. The financial toll, a staggering $75 billion in damage, ranking it among the costliest natural disasters ever to hit American soil. But beyond these numbers were countless personal tragedies. Families lost homes they'd lived in for generations. Businesses that had survived the pandemic were washed away in hours. Communities that had never experienced flooding found themselves underwater. What Ida taught us was humbling. In an era of climate change, no region is truly safe from nature's fury. From the Gulf Coast to the streets of Manhattan, this single storm demonstrated how vulnerable our infrastructure and communities remain, and how much work we still need to do to protect ourselves from these increasingly unpredictable disasters. Hurricane Ida wasn't just another storm. It was a wake-up call, reminding us that the forces of nature demand our respect, our preparation, and most importantly, our action to address the changing climate that makes such disasters more likely with each passing year.
Enjoying the video, correct? Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. Please leave your feedback, hit like, share the content.
When you think of natural disasters that changed America forever, Hurricane Andrew stands as one of the most profound examples. I'll never forget the stories my uncle told me about that fateful August in 1992, when one of the most destructive storms in U.S. history made landfall in South Florida. Picture this. It's the middle of the night, August 24th, 1992. Families are huddled in their homes, some in bathrooms, others in hallways, listening to the deafening roar of 165-mile-per-hour winds. The sound, survivors say, was like a freight train running through their living rooms. What made Andrew particularly devastating wasn't just its raw power. It was the fact that it hit one of America's most populated regions. South Florida, a paradise of palm trees and beautiful beaches, was transformed into a war zone in just a few hours. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to splinters. Places like Homestead and Florida City looked like they'd been hit by a bomb. The numbers are staggering. $27.3 billion in damage. That's about $55 billion in today's money. But the true cost goes far beyond dollars and cents. 65 precious lives were lost, and countless others were forever changed. Families who had spent generations building their homes saw everything disappear in a single night. But here's where the story takes an important turn. Hurricane Andrew became a wake-up call for America. Before Andrew, many buildings in Florida were constructed under relatively loose building codes. After seeing entire communities reduced to rubble, officials realized something had to change. This disaster literally rewrote the rule book on how we build our homes and communities. Today, Florida has some of the strictest building codes in the nation. New homes are built to withstand major hurricanes, with impact-resistant windows, reinforced roofs, and stronger foundations. It's a bitter lesson learned from those who lost everything in Andrew's fury. Perhaps the most powerful legacy of Hurricane Andrew isn't just in the buildings we construct, but in how we prepare for disasters. It changed how we track hurricanes, how we evacuate communities, and how we respond when disaster strikes. Sometimes it takes our darkest moments to light the way forward, and Andrew, despite its destruction, helped create a more resilient America. On May 2, 2008, Myanmar faced one of the darkest chapters in its history when Cyclone Nargis made landfall. I want to share with you the story of this devastating natural disaster that changed a nation forever. Picture this. It's a warm evening in Myanmar's Irrawaddy Delta. Families are going about their usual routines, unaware that their lives are about to be turned upside down. The warnings were there, but many didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what was coming. Nargis wasn't just another tropical storm. It was a monster that had been gathering strength over the warm waters of the Bay of Bengal, transforming into a Category 4 cyclone with winds reaching speeds that could lift houses off their foundations. When it struck, the destruction was unprecedented. The storm surge, reaching heights of up to 25 feet, swept inland for miles. Entire villages disappeared underwater. The wind howled like 1,000 angry spirits, tearing apart homes, schools, and temples that had stood for generations. The numbers are heartbreaking. More than 138,000 people lost their lives, making it the deadliest natural disaster in Myanmar's recorded history. To put this in perspective, imagine losing the entire population of a mid-sized city in a single event. The financial toll was equally staggering. The damage reached $12.9 billion, devastating an already struggling economy. But numbers alone can't capture the true cost. The lost family photos, the destroyed cultural heritage, the scattered communities. What made this disaster even more tragic was the response, or lack thereof, from Myanmar's military government. In the crucial first days after the cyclone, when every hour meant the difference between life and death for survivors, the government's reluctance to accept international aid cost countless lives. Relief workers were delayed, supplies sat in airports, and desperate communities were left to fend for themselves. The aftermath of Cyclone Nargis became a harsh lesson in the importance of disaster preparedness and the critical need for swift, coordinated emergency response. It exposed the vulnerabilities of not just Myanmar's infrastructure, but its political system as well. Today, 15 years later, the scars of Nargis are still visible in Myanmar. Some communities have rebuilt, while others never fully recovered. But the memory of this catastrophic event continues to influence how the region prepares for and responds to natural disasters. Nargis serves as a sobering reminder of nature's incredible power and the devastating consequences when human factors amplify natural disasters. It's a story that demands to be remembered, not just for the lives lost, but for the lessons learned in its wake. Today, we're looking back at one of the most devastating natural disasters to hit the Philippines, Typhoon Bopha, locally known as Pablo, which struck in 2012. This wasn't just another tropical storm. It was a catastrophe that wrote itself into history in the most unexpected way. What made Bopha particularly sinister was its unusual path. You see, most typhoons that hit the Philippines follow predictable routes, giving communities time to prepare. But Bopha, it was different. It carved a path through Mindanao, a region that rarely sees typhoons of this magnitude. Imagine living in an area where you've never had to worry much about typhoons, then suddenly facing one of the most powerful storms of the decade. The residents of Mindanao weren't just unprepared, they were blindsided. Many had never experienced a typhoon of this strength before. Communities that had stood for generations were torn apart in hours. The wind speeds were horrifying, reaching up to 280 kilometers per hour. Trees that had stood for hundreds of years were uprooted like twigs. Houses? They didn't stand a chance. The numbers tell a heartbreaking story. Over 1,900 lives lost. Mothers, fathers, children, entire families. The economic impact was staggering too, 1.4 billion in damage. But these aren't just numbers. They represent destroyed homes, ruined livelihoods, and shattered dreams. What's particularly tragic about Bopha was how it exposed the vulnerability of communities that had never needed to develop robust typhoon resistance. Schools that had never needed storm shutters were destroyed. Farms that had flourished for generations were wiped out in a single night. The disaster forced a complete rethinking of disaster preparedness in regions previously considered safe from such storms. This event changed everything for the Philippines. It showed that in our changing climate, no region can consider itself completely safe from extreme weather. It led to major reforms in disaster preparation and response, especially in areas traditionally considered outside the typhoon belt. Today, a decade later, the lessons of Bopha continue to influence how the Philippines and other nations prepare for natural disasters. It stands as a stark reminder that nature can be unpredictable, and that we must always be ready, even in places where we least expect disaster to strike. The story of Typhoon Bopha isn't just about destruction. It's about resilience, about learning to adapt in a changing world, and about the importance of being prepared, no matter where you are. Because sometimes, the most dangerous storms are the ones you never see coming.